friend, welcome to my channel. If we have not yet met, I'm Erin, military spouse and teacher turned photographer, and I love helping fellow Milspouse photographers build businesses that thrive despite frequent moves. One of the best ways that you can prepare for an upcoming PCS is to talk to other Milspouse photographers who live this life too. So I'm so excited to be starting a brand new series on this channel where I will be highlighting members of Photographers Changing Stations, our free Facebook group, and learning about the different members both inside and outside their businesses. I'm so glad to have you here and can't wait to kick off this conversation with Melissa Sheridan. Melissa, welcome. So glad to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be your first guest, and I just love that you're starting this.
Yeah, well, it's kind of fun to have you as the first guest because I don't know if you know this or not, but you actually inspired me to start this whole group. It was through our connection right before you were moving to DC and I was moving to Dayton. And yeah, I just feel like we were what each other needed to get us started and get ready for the move. So.
Oh, that makes me so happy. Yeah, I know. I'm sad we didn't overlap longer, but I feel like your whole community has just made it where like I'm more connected with people who are actually in my area, and then getting connected with people who, you know, all over the place, but we still have connections because we've lived in the same duty station or whatnot. So.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I was thinking back, I don't think we have like a, exciting how we connected story. I think it was just like a random Instagram connection, and all of a sudden, like maybe you were reaching out to me about DC, or I found you I don't even know, but it worked out really well.
I don't know either. I know it was Instagram, and then we're like, hey, let's get together. And
yeah, the rest, as they say, is history.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, we've already dived in a little bit about how we know each other, but I would love for you to start and give us your traditional Milspouse introduction, where you are, where you've been stationed, what's your military connection, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So I've been a military spouse for 13 years. My husband Adam is in the Air Force. We met in college, and he went to a military academy, so I started dating him our junior year of college. So I knew that if I ever wanted a future with him, the military was going to be.
That was it.
Yep, that was it. And he was always kind of up in the air about if he wanted to be in for 20, but we are definitely on that track. He's hit 14 years in May, and we're getting there.
Yeah.
The Air Force has always treated us really well, and despite thinking I would never end up in this lifestyle, I actually grew up in a military town, and my family's not military, so I was like, what is going on? All you people. And then, of course, I would end up in this community, but I wouldn't change it for the world. So this past summer, we just had our 7th move in 13 years,
Whew.
And we are now in DC, where you were just at. We have lived in Colorado, Boston, Texas, Hawaii, Charlottesville, Virginia, Alabama, and now Northern Virginia. So
Whew.
A few places.
A few places, yes. Well, that is awesome.
And then did you want me to talk about my business facts?
Yeah, absolutely. What do you shoot? Those kind of things.
So my business started kind of back in 2016. My first daughter was about 1, and I had kind of been just taking pictures of her, and we lived at a base that was kind of really remote. There wasn't a lot of people there, so I got the chance to kind of portfolio build in that area. And then shortly after that, we moved to Hawaii, and that was super great.
Oh my gosh, that's like my dream.
Yeah, it's a dream. So that was kind of an easy sell, and I just kind of dabbled in a little bit of everything because I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I'm completely self-taught. I did not ever think I'd be a photographer. I have an English degree. I thought I was going to go into journalism.
Wow.
So just kind of, I like to call it my accidental business.
Oh, I love that.
It all means to start this, and yet here I am. And actually my real inspiration for starting my business was I had a mini session with another military spouse photographer when we were in Texas. And I walked away from that just being like, well, if she can do that, so can I, right? It seemed really easy, of course, now.
Ignorance is bliss.
But she was kind of my inspiration for that, and it just kind of snowballed from there. But yeah, as of right now, I mainly focus on family photography. I have a studio for newborns and children, and I do like to do military events when I can. I've also previously done wedding photography, and we can get into why I don't do that anymore.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I have noticed about you is that you cover a lot of different niches, and you said you don't do any weddings anymore, but you've photographed a lot of different things. So can you talk about how moving has kind of forced you into different things or starting new niches, leaving others behind? Like, how has moving impacted that?
Yeah, it's definitely changed a lot because different areas of the country, like certain types of photography are very regional. Even within weddings, like types of weddings that you might
Hmm.
shoot. Like in Hawaii, it was all elopements on like rocky cliffs of Hawaii and it's beautiful, or beaches, versus, somewhere like DC, it's very formal, upscale, really expensive weddings, that type of thing. So it definitely depends on where you live, what kind of things you shoot. I would say my Hawaii days was just figuring out what I wanted to do at all, and I did a little bit of everything to figure that out. When I left Hawaii, I was really with the mindset of the only way to be a successful photographer and like really make money with this was to be a wedding photographer.
Mm.
And so I really chased that hard. I was in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is one of the top destination wedding cities in the whole US, which I had no idea until
Interesting.
I
I
did.
didn't know that.
Yeah, they
I mean,
have
I'm sure
over
it's
40
beautiful.
wineries. So I think it's the wineries that really draw people there,
Gotcha.
for which it's gorgeous. But it was just a very cutthroat society and kind of hard to. Everyone kind of viewed each other as competition there, and it was just hard to break into that. But when we were in Charlottesville, we PCSed 9 months earlier than I was expecting, of course,
Yay.
and I had 6 months of weddings booked. And so then I moved to Dayton, where you are now, and I had to travel back for two weddings. I had two different photographers associate shoot weddings for me, and then one wedding I had to like completely cut ties with because it turned into a bridezilla situation. I probably dodged a bullet there, but
uh,
it just, yeah. So that was hard. And then yeah, we've been to so many different places. So I don't know. I'm thinking of Alabama. That's where I was last year. I would say it's just like regionally people value different things. So I felt
hmm.
like in Alabama, people really wanted like natural, they just want to be in a field, or they really like the scenery of Alabama versus I don't think a lot of people valued studio work out there, versus Northern Virginia. I feel like people love studio work or they want much more formal portraits. So yeah, you just kind of have to go with it. And I also feel like I've just learned what I like and don't like. So
Yeah,
that
I
has
mean, when you do
also,
something for a long time, you kind of figure out, what lights you up. That's awesome.
right. And if you can get those two things to align, like what you really love shooting and what your ideal client also enjoys, that's like the sweet spot that
Yes. It's like what every entrepreneur is striving for, right?
yes.
That's
Yes.
great. In addition to like the different niches that you've been part of, I'm interested in you have a wide variety of places you've lived. You've been in the Northeast, you've been in the beaches of Hawaii, you've been in like smallish town Ohio, you've been in the deep South, now you're in DC. What has pricing looked like for you as you've gone from one place to the next?
Yeah, so also with just types of photography that people prefer or the style of photography, whether it's lifestyle or much more formal, pricing is very regional too. And unless you've lived in a lot of different regions, like it's interesting. I'll talk with other photographers who they've been a photographer in their same town for 10 years, and they have a very interesting and like sometimes different view about pricing than I do
Hmm.
because I popped around. And I feel like that's just general of people who haven't moved versus people who have. We just
Sure.
kind of have different worldviews. Um, and yeah, it definitely varies. I feel like somewhere like Hawaii is very interesting because I feel like there are a lot of very cheap and affordable photographers there because everyone wants to be a photographer in Hawaii.
Gotcha.
And also because it's an island, there's nowhere else to go, and just like
Yeah, kind of
the
secluded.
conversation is all there. You can't really move around. But there's also really expensive photographers there because Hawaii is like a destination for weddings or people vacationing, whatever. So that was kind of all over the road versus somewhere like I feel like Ohio potentially and definitely Alabama, just the cost of living being so much lower.
Mm-hmm.
People just are not they really are not going to pay over a certain amount unless you're really targeting that like top 5% type of people, which I think you just have to have some kind of in to get those types of clients. And being a military spouse, I'm not there long enough to really establish that kind of clientele.
Yeah.
So, while I think some marketing guru somewhere is probably like, no, you can absolutely just keep your prices the same no matter where you go. Well, your volume of work is going to change. So I think it's just up to you. Like, do you want to completely only have a few bookings and you're just not, I don't know. You
Yeah.
really have to. That's a big struggle with moving. It's just changing that all the time.
I hear that. I'm feeling it right now, coming from somewhere where the
Yes.
cost of living is so high in DC. And, I can justify charging less here because the cost of living is less, but it's also kind of a gut punch to have to lower your prices. And so
Yes.
it's interesting to figure out. But just like you're saying, I agree. Like, you have to decide, what does your schedule look like? How often do you want to be shooting? And that is just as much a part of your pricing as, your actual cost of doing business.
Yes.
So, do you have any advice you'd give to someone who's, let's say me, like, I just moved to a new area where the cost of living is lower, or I want to be shooting more and I need to lower my prices? Like, what advice would you give to someone about their pricing moving around?
Yeah, I mean, because I just, I don't know, 7 months off of a move, but I'm still kind of figuring out my pricing for the
Mm-hmm.
area too. So I feel like we both kind of arrived at the same time. Um, I guess for anybody, I would just say stop looking at other photographers' pricing.
So
Don't
good.
look at other photographers' pricing. And, it's, of course, you move somewhere, you want to kind of get a feel for what is the pricing, what's going on, but that doesn't mean you know anything about how that person's running their business. They could be, shooting hundreds of minis a year, and that's how they can offer them so cheaply. Or they could be in debt and like totally upside down on their business. Like, I don't know, unless it's someone you want to take business advice from, don't just look at their pricing and think, well, this is what it's got to
Yeah,
be.
they
And
could be just making it up too.
I mean, I think a lot of us are, so, but I guess it's good to do some market research, figure it out, kind of get a feel for things. But what it comes down to is, what is your cost of doing business? And especially for where I am, my cost of doing business is going through the roof because I'm offering a studio. I have like lots of expenses to get that going, and
Mm-hmm.
lighting, and parking and permits. I mean, the whole thing with
Yeah.
DC. So versus somewhere like Alabama, I had so few expenses because I wasn't running a studio there. There was literally no permits anywhere. You didn't have to pay for parking. It was just very different.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to factor all that in, and then also just what you want to make, how much you want to be working.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to provide for your family, right? So, not just covering your business costs, but you might need to make more money in a place like DC than you would in Alabama.
Right. And yeah, it's easy to be discouraged because I know I see a lot of. I'm particularly trying to build up my newborn photography business again,
Mm-hmm.
specifically for like studio newborns. And I see so many people recommending people on Facebook groups, or, oh, we just love this girl, and they're. I'm like, I spend more in props on that than I do, what they're
Yeah.
getting for the session. And I think a lot of people who aren't into photography don't understand the whole cost behind things. And it's so tempting for me to say, oh, I want to charge less, but then I think whatever, I'm speaking of a specific photographer I know. I know she's doing like multiple newborn sessions a week. I couldn't even handle that. So I'm like, well, if I lower my pricing to get more to that point, I don't want to do that. I only want to take 2 to 3
Right.
newborns a month. So I'm happy with where my pricing is because I'm not bringing in that amount of business. So I don't know. It's a really tough balance. And I think it's so delicate everywhere you go, and like where you are in your own business journey
For
too.
sure. For sure. It's so much more complicated than just saying, I'm going to charge $400 for a session. Call it good. Um,
Right.
I want to shift gears a little bit. One of the other photographers in our community, Melanie, noted that you do a really good job plugging into community when you get to a new place. And I've noticed this myself as well. Like we said, we got to meet up for a little bit in DC right after you moved. I would love for you to talk to us a little bit about how you do that, how you find your people, why do you find it important to plug in as quickly as you do? Walk us through that.
Yeah, I thought that was so nice of Melanie to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really value community, especially being. I mean, it's just me. Like, it's me, and technically my husband is kind of an employee of my business too. But like, that's it.
Yes.
Same as you. It's just us. And it gets a little bit lonely. But I think when I started my photography career in Hawaii, the military spouse photographer community was really close knit because you were going to run into that person somewhere. The bases are close, the island is
Mm-hmm.
small. We were on Oahu, and you can't escape each other, so you might as well be nice. And I think that was kind of the drive for that. I was like, let's just all support each other. And I thought, great, this is what photography community is like. And then I went to Charlottesville, Virginia, and there's no military base there. People did not know why we were an Air Force family that lived in
Mm.
Charlottesville. There is an Army JAG school there, but we weren't connected to that at all. So it was just kind of a random location.
Yeah.
And I did make a really good like best friend photographer friend there. not a military spouse, but I didn't have any like military spouse photographer friends. So it was just locals who were a little cutthroat and like everyone felt like competition.
Mm,
So I just never wanted to make somebody else feel like that, which is why I love to like support everyone, no matter where they are in their business. I'm not going to look down on you if you're, this and that. But I feel like with how many moves, because I've moved my business 4 times, so with how many moves my business has had, like that is the number one thing I do before I change SEO, before I start like marketing. I'm looking for other photographers on Instagram, and I'm joining all of the Facebook groups or seeing if there is like a Northern Virginia photographers group type of thing when I
yeah,
move to just get to, because those are the people you want information from and the people who you become friends with, like you and I. So,
absolutely.
yeah, that's really important to me. And I would just say social media is obviously the best way to do that. If you're not a social media person, I guess you could reach out like on someone's website or individually, but yeah, I'd say social media just brings a lot of us together now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you were in a really sweet spot for making a lot of photographer friends. That was one of the hardest parts for me of leaving DC is having so many connections there. So take advantage of them while you're there. Awesome. Well, I would love to switch gears one more time. One of the reasons that there was so much interest in doing this series in our group is because people want to get to know each other outside of their photography businesses as well. You know, we are all Milspouse photographers, but we're all so much more than that too. And so I would love for you to share a little bit about the Melissa outside of the military life, outside of the photography business. Like, what do you like to do? Tell us more about you.
Yeah, I know. Melissa, when I'm not a military spouse or photographer, what am I?
Yes.
So I am really a pretty introverted person. I would say most duty stations, I have like one or two good friends. I'm not a super social person. I'm not trying to make friends with everyone unless you're another military spouse photographer. I want to be friends with all of you guys. Um, but pretty much keep to myself. I've got 2 kids that keep me pretty busy. I really love fitness. I am usually pretty into running. I'm not really running right now, but like when we lived in Ohio, I ran 2 marathons back to back. So
Oh,
like I'm pretty really like fitness. So that's a big like piece of my life that if it's missing, I'm going crazy. Um, I really like baking. I don't enjoy cooking, but I like baking. And I love reading. So
ooh, what
I'm
kind of books
always,
do you like to read?
I really like thrillers.
Okay.
So, like Lisa Jewell, like Then She Was Gone type stuff. I'm okay with fantasy. I don't really like mainstream fantasy, like Harry Potter. Love Harry Potter, that kind of thing, or Game of Thrones and that. But yeah, always reading. Our whole family is super into reading. As a family, we love to camp. I think I mentioned that on your story the other day. You're like,
Yes.
what's in Ohio? And we camped at, yeah, Kelly's Island. That was so cool because you take a ferry over and like
You know, I was
you know,
born and raised in Cleveland and I've never been to Kelly's Island. And
you need
that's
to go
like,
there.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, being from Colorado, I camped as a kid. Camping
Sure.
was just like a big part of my life. We love camping. And my also newfound love is I'm like a huge Disney person. We
Oh,
went to
fun.
Disney World last fall as a family, and my like big, well, we already are planning it. We're going to go to Disney again this November, but that's like my business goal is like I'm sending my family to Disney again.
That's
And
awesome.
so you will see me wearing some Mickey ears probably on my
I love it. And what a great goal to work towards knowing that your business is doing something fun for your family.
yeah, I'm really excited.
Cool. Well, we are going to wrap up here in a second, but there is one more question I want to ask you. I decided I want to end these interviews with like a fun question. It might not be the same for everybody. We'll see how it goes. But I would love to know if you could be stationed anywhere for 2 years in the whole world, where would you go and why?
Singapore.
Ooh.
Um, there is actually job opportunities for my husband, like one position, which, needle in a haystack, it would have to line up. He's told me, like, I think it's really, he's outranked it. It was something that, like, he could have done a couple years ago. I'm like,
Okay.
well, I don't
Like,
know. But when we were in Hawaii, we vacationed in Thailand and Singapore, and Singapore was so cool. It's so clean. It felt kind of almost like a New York City of Asia, but like clean version. I don't know. It was like just everything was so clean there. It was super neat. The food was like really good. So yeah, I would like absolutely love to live anywhere in Asia. Unfortunately, my husband's job doesn't really go overseas,
okay.
so uh, anywhere overseas. I think Germany would be cool too because my husband is really into beer and stuff.
He would love it.
We
That's
would go to
awesome.
Singapore every week, though.
Very cool. That I don't know what I was expecting you to say, but that wasn't it. So nice job. That's awesome. Well, can you share where others could connect with you if someone is headed to any of the bunch of bases that you've been to? Where can they find you and ask questions, all those things?
Well, you can always look me up in Erin's database.
Shameless plug. Love it.
I do love that. It's an easy way to figure out where people have been. But I am just Melissa Sheridan Photography on Instagram and Facebook. My website is melissasheridanphotography.com, and that's pretty much where I hang out. So,
Awesome. I love that. Well, thank you so much for taking time for this, for being my very first guest. Hopefully, we can reconnect on here again sometime down the road. We'll add more bases to your list and circle back then.
yes, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa.